Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard. It's almost like a continuation of our last show, at least for the first part of the hour. And then the second part of the hour, I've got another guest. His name is Art Robinson. He's running for Congress, and he's got quite a thing to say. I wanted to make sure that I addressed the issue today, and during the next time around, everybody's sort of focused on the presidential election. But we got into that whole issue to start off with by let's cleaning the swamp. And I've got my version of cleaning the swamp here in the state of Oregon, Portland, Oregon. Compliments of the Oregon Voters Digest. So with that, we're just going to get right here now and bring on, I'm sorry, we're going to bring on Donna Maxey, and she is the founder and director of Race Talk, who's putting on this piece. Put that right there on the there we go, we got it now. Candidate Forum, Portland's first African-American female city council member, Joanne Hardesty and Loretta Smith. You can go back on the last show. We did the whole hour with Donna, and she shared with her background and also the rationale for basically taking on this job. It's really a job, because I'm concerned about the media within our community, within the city of Portland for that matter, in terms of how they interview both of these folks who are in a runoff for a city council seat, talking to the issues, and not letting this be kind of a bloodbath on maybe their past and things of that nature. As far as I'm concerned, both of these individuals have been around this community for years. So let's make sure that, as far as I'm concerned, why bring something up that you should have known to begin with? I'm interested in the issues. Now, if it's so bad that in fact that they lied, this, that, and the other, we'll deal with that. But then let's bring on Donna, and she can kind of share a couple of points about that. Donna, it's yours.
Well,
where's it going to be?
What's really interesting when you say the media talking about these two candidates, I have spoken to both of these candidates, and from the very beginning, before the race and since the race, and neither one of them has said anything negative about the other. They have been very professional, very mature. None of this twatter kind of stuff going on, and I have appreciated that. And so this whole point of having this forum is to recognize that this is a historical moment, that we have two African-American female candidates who are, and that one of them is going to be a city council member. Doesn't matter which one, they're both very qualified, overqualified for this position because of the experiences that they have had. So I'm excited about this. I don't know, one day I just woke up and realized Joanne and Loretta are both black. Now, I knew they were, but I don't think of them as black women. I think of them as people that I know. And that might sound strange to some people, but when I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror, I don't go, gee, you're black. I go, gee, you got to get it together.
And they know the community.
Right.
And they know the people within the community, the city of Portland. And because if in fact they're going to be effective, they got to know what the issues are around the city.
I'm not sure how long Joanne has been here in the community, but when I came back 21 years ago, she was here and actively involved. I know Loretta's family. I went to elementary school with her family. So she has been here a long time. I don't know if she was born here or not. What I do know is they know the community, and they have both had blood and sweat that they have put into making this a better place. So I appreciate what they're doing, and I wanted to showcase them. There are some people, I understand, who do confuse the two of them. If you look at the pictures, they look nothing alike. And they seem pretty distinguishable to me, other than the fact that they both happen to be African American and both happen to be female. And I don't think that either of those characteristics is the major characteristic that we need to be concerned about these two people. Okay,
that's a good point. But again, the issues. Now you've got Trish Tillman, who's going to be doing, basically, she's going to be doing the moderating or whatever. And what is that going to look like in terms of
Well, it's going to be at the McMenamin's Kennedy, not, excuse me, we're usually at Kennedy School. We're going to be at McMenamin's Crystal Ballroom.
Okay.
And that's at 1332 West Burnside.
Burnside, right across from the park, so to speak, on the corner, right before you get on the freeway, so to speak.
Right, on 14th, you go
Right.
down 14th, and
Right.
so just before you turn to go onto the freeway and to 405.
Okay.
So this is very monumental. I'm excited for both of them. The event will we have about 400 seats that will be available. We're opening the doors at 6 o'clock. The event starts at 7. It's from 7 to 9. Normally at Race Talks we have small discussion groups, but we won't be doing that this time. Trish will be the moderator, and there will be almost an hour of questions from the moderator and the candidates, and then there will be about 40 minutes worth of Q&A from the audience. And by Q&A, we're not opening up a microphone, but there will be a card on each person's seat along with an evaluation that they can give substantive feedback to each of the candidates.
Okay.
And we've asked 5 questions of each about each candidate for the audience, and so this is their first forum together.
Right.
And this will
Very
be
important
feedback for them to receive. We're hoping to have a great turnout. On Facebook, we've had something like 27,000 people who've, on our website and Facebook, 27,000 people who have noticed it and mentioned interest. We're hoping to have a very integrated audience there in terms of...
Are you going to have enough room, space?
Well, no.
I mean, there's a seat.
Well, if we were up jigging and dancing, then it would be 700, but because of seats, it's 400. So we'll have 400 seats. Want people to know so that when you come in, you are not offended. Whenever there is an event at the Crystal Ballroom, they have a metal detector. So that will be at the front door, and people will go through the metal detector before they come in. Some of the things that we're going to be doing...
What time does the gate open?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock, and what about 5:30? You said it starts at 6, or?
No, the doors open at 6, and it starts at 7.
Starts at 7, okay.
So there are a couple of interesting things that are going to happen. It will be simulcast down to the Ringler restaurant downstairs. So if you don't want to come up to the Crystal Ballroom, you can go down and eat in the restaurant, and there will be a complete meal in the restaurant, whereas up in the Crystal Ballroom there will be beer and pretzels and pizza.
Okay.
So, if you want a complete meal, go downstairs.
And what about our business here at Open Signal? You got anybody there that's gonna video this thing so we can put it back on?
We do have, it will be videoed, and it will be up on YouTube within 24 hours.
That's Facebook.
No, YouTube.
I'm not saying that's on, but again, that's going to be on Race Talk, right?
Yes.
Okay, is there a possibility of maybe working with them to make sure that they can get that out of there? Is there a problem with getting someone from Open Signal to do a piece?
You are asking too many hard questions.
I would never do that.
I am in Mercury retrograde.
Okay,
my car went down. My computer and my phone.
Would you have a problem with someone from Open Signal through Bruce Broussard coming
Bruce Broussard? I will put you in touch with the people who do that. I stay in my lane, Bruce. Some things I know, some things I don't.
You got that smile on it. You got to make sure that they can work with me, because you know how I am. I'll just walk in.
I will be in your corner.
I'll just walk in. I'll just start walk in. You know what I mean?
I'll be in your corner.
I'll be nice. I won't ask any questions.
Okay, thank you.
But I'll ask you some questions.
Okay.
Of the 5 questions, how many are they going to be questions about the issues of the issue, like gentrification, like health issues?
Well, what we originally talked about, because this is about race, what we originally talked about were issues of race.
Oh, is that what?
And so when we shared the original, I don't believe in surprises on these kinds of things, and so I presented the questions to the candidates ahead of time.
They liked it?
Well, they said they were okay, but they both said that there needed to be more substantive policy questions.
Okay.
So they each are putting in their sharing what are their ideas of policy questions they want to be asked about. One of the things that came up was this going to be a debate? And in a formal debate, a person makes a point, the other side gets to argue against it, and then the person answers back. both of them said, we do not want to do that. This is not about arguing that. What we want is to share our particular policy.
On the 5 questions.
On the question. No, the five questions are on the evaluation, and the questions are, I feel like I understand this candidate's policy better. I feel like that I can relate to this person. See, you're asking too many hard questions. I'm recovering from this concussion, and I don't remember all the 5 questions.
I'm a voter in that area too. I want to know, because I've been covering a lot, like homelessness.
Well, I'm sure that those are questions that they will bring out for the discussion.
They're going to bring it out?
Right.
You're not going to bring them out?
Well, no, they will be brought out. But what I'm saying is that when, for instance, if Loretta brings up a topic, then that question will be asked of both Loretta and Joanne. And if Joanne brings up a topic that Loretta hasn't brought up, then that question will be asked of both of them. They each have 2 minutes to answer their questions. Trish Tillman is an excellent person to do this.
Trish Tillman, former Multnomah County.
The head of the health department. Excellent candidate who has herself been a survivor of racism in the Multnomah County department. And unfortunately, as an African American female, this is something that we face, is racism against us as strong. I mean, I always say God doesn't give you any more than you can bear. And unfortunately, it seems like people think we're superwoman.
Because the issue within the city, as the city is very committed to wanting to understand what are the issues from an African American standpoint, and who's there to represent them in terms of representation. That will be a representation seat to a certain degree, besides other issues. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's the bulk, because the media doesn't have that opportunity. Well, they don't have that quality, if you will, to ask them the kinds of questions that particular community are of concern. Because in all due respect, as you know, we just went through a county election.
Right. And
Sheila DePaul made it very clear she knows nothing about the black community. So that's another very important piece that, as far as the race outcome. And actually, I know both of these folks are very familiar with the area, but they need to share that with not only with the people that are going to be there and from that community, but to the media, so they will know that is a major issue as it relates to what they want to hear, if you will, one way or the other.
Well, I'd like to say something about Sheila, and also about Joanne and Loretta, which is, as a politician, you should know every community, not just your own ethnic community.
I agree fully. Are you saying that did you vote? Which way did you vote?
On what?
What do you mean?
Oh,
we just had a county commission race. I ran.
Oh.
She said that she doesn't know anything about the black community.
I'm sorry. I'm not.
I didn't know.
I am not able to identify who I voted for. You know who I voted for, but I'm not able to share that publicly.
But anyway, I'm responding to you.
I'm being impartial in public.
Okay. I understand.
You know, I have no problem in speaking my mind.
I understand.
But what I do want to say is that whomever we elect, no matter what their ethnicity is, they need to know all of the communities and to represent those communities. My experience has been, however, that people of color tend to understand and reach out more to the variety of communities of color and know what the issues are better. If your representative does not understand your community, then you need to be in their face, calling them up, saying, these are my issues. Come visit this group. We're going to hold a community forum. We want you to hear what our issues are, because you are here to represent us. And whether that is Amanda Fritz or Chloe Daly, now we have 2 women. That's wonderful.
That's city council.
That's city council.
But the county plays a major role in this whole piece for the area.
Yes, but I'm saying that whomever your official...
You're going to interview her.
Pardon me?
You'll be interviewing. That's what you're saying. Thank you. I appreciate that. Which is Sheila DePaul. You'll interview her. That's good. Sheila got the message. You got to remember, folks, this is a Maxey. I knew her dad, and I know her mom, who's still here. I mean, they're right up front with they're very solid citizens within our community, and they address issues across the board. And I mean, hey, They right down to the throat. I like it. Well, look.
It's been an honor to be here, Bruce,
Yes,
as
okay,
always.
appreciate that very much. One more time, let's say where it's going to be.
It's the Candidate Forum, Portland's first African-American female city council member. It's at McMenamin's Crystal Ballroom, and in case you don't know, the candidates are Joanne Hardesty and Loretta Smith. The address is 1332 West Burnside on 14th and Burnside, Southwest. So please come early, get a seat. We'd like to have as a varietal community there as possible, as many women, as many older people, younger people. And men. I'm sorry.
All right. And by the way, I'll be the backup, if you will. If anything happens to Trish, I'll be more than glad to accommodate the forum.
Thank you.
Is that okay with you?
Thank you,
Okay,
Bruce.
fine.
I appreciate
Well, no,
that.
she's quite a. I mean, really, in all due respect, she's doing this, and hopefully, the media will be watching this, and hopefully, you'll watch the show the past week, if you will, last week, and check it out. And got a lot of information on that piece about her and whatever.
And I want to say this very quickly. We will have an evaluation that will be on each seat, along with a 3x5 card for people to write their questions throughout the time, and then we will be collecting those and presenting those questions to Trish to share with the candidates. Also, what I didn't finish saying is that we would like to have as many people as possible of different ethnicities there. That is very important.
Well, we'll make sure that happens.
All right, thank you.
On the show from my end of it, for sure. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much, Donna.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. We're going to take a short break, folks, and we'll be right back. Go to the show. It's good, great, and please, media, check it out. I don't want to call you fake news. Check it out.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay.
You are watching Oregon Voters Digest. This program can be seen again on these channels on these dates and times. Tell a friend.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. Again, I'm Bruce Broussard, your host, and I want to thank you, and hopefully you will go back last week and look at that show. I think this is going to be very dynamic, and having this forum, if you will, on the two candidates, both Loretta Smith and Joanne Bowman. It's really great. I mean, it's going to be a historical moment here in the city of Portland for the state of Oregon. Joanne Bowman at one point in time was a legislator for a couple of terms. And Loretta, as you know, been working for Senator Ron Wyden for some 20 years. She retired from there. And she then became a county commissioner for this area, District Number 2. And she spent 2 terms there. And so now she's going to be at the city of Portland. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun to do this because as you know, District 2 of the county also incorporates the majority of Portland and also the, quote, black community, the African American community. And as I indicated before, Sheila DePaul, who won the election in this farmers election, which I was in, but there's no runoff because she picked up more than 70% of the vote. But she made it very clear that when she was running that she didn't have any idea of what's happening in the black community. So it's going to be a very important piece. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm saying that media supported that race that way, but that's another story. I want to get down to what I'm here for today and why I have my guest here. His name is Art Robinson. I've known Mr. Robinson. In fact, he was at one point in time, he was chair of the Republican Party for the state of Oregon, and I saw an article in the Oregonian one day, and that was it. It's been history ever since. I've known this man for the last 3-4 years, not about 4 or 5 years, six years, the last 6 years aspect of it. And so the thing about this gentleman is that when I got back involved in the Republican Party at the time when I was there, is that it was kind of like filling in the so-called minority position. But I naturally I'd gotten away from that minority position. It was kind of like a holistic approach. And I met this gentleman after I saw the article in the Oregonian. And at the end of that day, the next day, he came on over and we chatted about it. I became his engagement chair for the Republican Party for the state of Oregon. And then subsequently, I even had the opportunity, because of this gentleman, to run for one of the positions with the Republican Party statewide. And fortunately, I think we had an excellent group, but the idea is that we weren't there, and things have happened. But that's, again, like I said, that's another story. You hear a little bit more about this gentleman. But what I wanted to do is that, the thing we're talking about right now is that the population across the country has said that we were tired of politicians, we're tired of Washington, et cetera, et cetera. So we came up with a whole new brand. It was, let's clean the swamp. Let's clean the swamp. And as you know, we got this whole issue of cleansing the swamp, and the big fight is up in D.C. against our President Donald Trump. And then anytime you use the word Trump, automatically it's just fight, fight, fight. No issues being done. But the idea, we started out talking about cleaning the swamp. And so I'm saying, what about the, quote, black community? And I got the same phrase. We're going to have to clean up our own swamp, too, as far as the black community is concerned. And in many ways, I'm not blaming those who are kind of like speaking for the other side of the coin in terms of joining the national piece. But the point I'm saying is that we were denied certain opportunities, if you will, to be able to be successful in the economy and things of that nature as it relates to African Americans. As you know, there are all sorts of African Americans in the media nowadays. I mean, they're all over the place on the front end. It's kind of interesting, and all of a sudden they weren't there before. They had a few, but now they're, just really they're just, again, joining the national situation. So what we're going to be doing today is that Mr. Robinson here, Art Robinson, is running for Congress, and that's district number 4. Number 4. From a gentleman, in all due respect, he cleaning the swamp, the same entity that I'm interested in. But Art's going to kind of share with us our version, my version, if you will, that's my opinion, about what areas should we be looking in terms of cleaning the swamp. It's our education system. Our education system. If you're not educated in this society, in all due respect, you only have one way out, and that is to get into the criminal justice system. It's really a sad note, folks. You got to be able to read and write. Okay, read and write. Very simple. And so with that, I'm just going to interview this man and introduce this gentleman, and he's just going to go on and we've already talked about this, and I want him to just go on and share with you all what discussion we had in regards to what I felt very strongly about in terms of cleaning the swamp as it relates in our community, so that so our kids and our futures are here, and we're now becomes part of, if you will, we can assimilate for a change. Which is a bad word for us right now. So, Art, thank you very much for being part of the show.
Thank you for having me, Bruce.
How you been?
Well, I'm doing fine, except you gave me a tough job.
Yes.
You said I should talk about education and racism.
Okay. Yes.
And so I will.
Yeah. Please.
I'll start with Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King, in his most famous speech, the first half of the speech is dedicated to the Constitution of the United States, which he greatly revered. And the second half of the speech, of course, is his plea that the constitutional rights guaranteed in the Constitution be applied to his people, because at that time, they weren't. African American people were not doing as well in having their constitutional rights honored by the United States government. But the problem also relates to education, because this problem started after the Civil War, when the Constitution applied to everyone. The greatest educator in American history was Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington, by far, hands down. He's a black man. After the Civil War, he devoted his life to the education of his people. He started Tuskegee University. It was extraordinary. And if you read his books, you will be astonished. Booker T. Washington said that the purpose of education is to learn to discern and discover the truth. If you have the ability to learn the truth on any matter, whether it's a matter in your business or a matter of politics or whatever, then you'll do pretty well in life because you'll always be guided by the truth. And the reason for education, in his view, was to determine the truth, to learn how to find the truth. So if you take a young person starting school, they study mathematics. Well, mathematics is useful, but the most interesting thing about math is the answers are always either right or wrong. There is truth. So a student that spends an hour in the day, first hour of the day learning the truth in math, seeks the truth in other subjects. But he needs certain tools. He needs to be able to read and write. Reading is not education. Reading is a tool you need to have to get education. And if he doesn't know the truth, he's easily misled. Now, what do we have today? President Trump is trying in many ways to save our nation and to save our constitutional republic, to save the system of government that Martin Luther King so much admired. He just wanted it for his people. What has happened since, and King would have been astonished, instead of his people getting more of their constitutional rights, the government has grown so much it's taking the same rights away from all of us, no matter what our race. But and of course, racism has become nothing but a political word. You run for office in this country and the left will scream you're a racist in the first day. I think it took the first week when I ran for office. And with no evidence, it's just another epithet to throw at people, just like all the swear words they throw at the president and all of the lies they tell about him. But in order to solve these problems and to help our president save the country and to help ourselves through life, we need to know the truth. That's what education's about. Well, let me use an example. Since I'm running for Congress, Congress, under the Constitution, only has control over the schools in Washington, D.C. The 10th Amendment leaves education entirely to the states and the people. The only schools the U.S. Congress, and I'm running for Congress, has any authority in is the D.C. schools. Well, the D.C. schools can have 50,000 K through 12 students. And it happens that 67% of them are black. There are 35,000 black kids there. The taxpayers spend, through the Congress, about $500,000 for every 30-student classroom for every 9-month period. It's a lot of money. The teacher, if she's well paid, will be paid, and her retirement and the cost of the room and so forth is about a fourth of that. The other three-fourths doesn't reach the classroom. It goes to special interests, to bureaucrats, to unions. It goes to all the people that have signed on to the educational system in order to get money and power. And even with that fourth, you might say, well, there's a lot of waste in systems where the kids need a good education. If we have to waste $3 out of 4 to give them a great education, do it. But the problem is that's not working in D.C. Most of the students who graduate from the schools in D.C. cannot read or write. Now, they talk about racism in this country. Say a black man is shot by a policeman. A terrible tragedy. Anyone like that's a tragedy, whether it's a white man or a black man or whatever. There are hundreds of thousands of policemen. Some of them are untrained. Some of them shouldn't be carrying guns. You know the problem. And so every time a tragedy of this happens, the cry is racism. But I ask you, what is it when 35,000 young people are not taught to read and write? My opponent in this election, Peter DeFazio, brags that he wants more money for the D.C. schools. But he votes against every measure to improve the schools. More money just goes to his union friends and comes back to him at election time. And he pretends that he's doing something. But he votes against every change in the schools. What you have, and I know no better way to describe it, a lot of congressmen parading across Washington in their fancy clothes, and their big salaries, and their wealthy positions, while 35,000 black kids scurry about beneath their feet, unable to read and write. If you want to know what I think is racism, that's racism, not the terrible tragedies that occur occasionally in our country and occur to all sorts of races. Today, our police, I think, we got in a bad shape because there are hundreds of thousands of officers under the tension of their jobs. Some of them are poorly trained. Some of them shouldn't be policemen.
Many are black, too.
Yeah, and some of them get excited in serious situations. We will always be able to find in the 300 million people in the country tragedies occurring individually here and there. And it's terrible when they happen, whether they happen to a black man or a white man or whatever. Those are mostly accidental or accidental because the man shouldn't have been in that position with a gun. But it's not accidental that 35,000 black young people in Washington, D.C. will never be able to have the opportunities in life that they should have had because they were not taught to read and write. That's the kind of institutional racism we have. And Booker T. Washington, after the Civil War, devoted his life to preventing that.
And that was way back when, right after
That was right after the Civil War. But he was actually the most revered black man in the South and the North after the war for a long, long time. Right after the war, he got an education. It was a little later. An incredible man. And he said, education is, the purpose of education is to learn to be able to discern the truth. And for that, you need to be able to read and write and study all the things that have been written that you have access to. You need to be able to read our Constitution. You need to be able to read your Bible. You need to be able to read books where that's where the knowledge is. And to discern what is true in those documents, what is not true in those documents, to guide your way through life with an ability to find the truth. He taught his people that if they learned and if they worked hard and they produced something that their community wanted, and they had a product, let's say, that their neighbors wanted to buy, no one would even notice the color of their skins. He was right. But he was also right that our people need to be able to discern the truth and have trained minds to allow them to do that. And if I had to pick, I don't know the whole country, I've lived 76 years and I've seen a lot of things, and I'm a scientist by trade, which puts me in a laboratory where the issues are not political. But the worst racism in this country, in my opinion today, is the racism that keeps preferentially in situations like Washington, D.C., where it's under the control of the U.S. Congress, young kids,
black kids,
primarily. Especially black kids in that case, about 17% of those are Hispanics, but black kids. There you have 35,000 black kids who have every right to have a wonderful life that America offers, being turned loose at the age of 18, unable to read and write.
Now, you mentioned Booker T. Washington.
Yes.
One, when did he start this? And why didn't they take that on and say, well, this is what we're going to implement in our education system, because they called the war a slave war? Well,
they did at first. Now, there were differences, as we know. Martin Luther King fought real differences. But our educational system, it's decayed for everybody. When I went to school, we had the best schools in the world. Today we have the worst schools in the developed world. I went to great schools. They got me into Caltech. I got a career in science. I've had a wonderful life, and my family has a wonderful life as a result of that. Some black men and women have had the same opportunity, but fewer, because of the historical things which Martin Luther King had to fight. But today, we have a situation where the administrative state, the swamp, and the president is quite right in calling it a swamp, has gotten control of our educational system. Think about this, not just the black kids in D.C. In Oregon and across the country, on average, $360,000 is spent for every 30-student classroom for 9 months.
For every 30 students?
Every 30 students.
Okay.
Every 30 students, 9 months, the taxpayers pay $360,000. Now, $100,000 would certainly make the teacher happy.
Yes.
Another $20,000 for the room. That's only a third of the money. 2/3 of the money is going to the swamp. Wow. The local swamps, the county swamps, the state swamps, and the federal swamp. It's going to special interests. It's going to bureaucrats. It's going to lawyers. It's going to people who do not teach. And if you wanted to improve, see, as a candidate for Congress, I could only say what a congressman should do about this. Well, I'll tell you what a congressman should do, and I think you could do it because most of the Congress isn't interested in this problem. Get control of the D.C. schools, double the cost, double the salaries of the teachers, throw out all the bureaucrats, get rid of the poor teachers and get the best in the world. Within 2 years, you could turn the D.C. schools into the best schools in the world and have half your money left over.
Wow.
If you did that, that would set an example for schools throughout our country. Congress, under the Constitution, can't run our state schools, but they could sure as hell set an example.
But that's where most of the problem is with the
That's
swamp.
right. And if you took those black kids, those 35,000 black kids and the other 15,000 of other races, and fired the swamp, which surrounds them, fire the swamp, double the prices, double the salaries of the teachers, get rid of the poor teachers. You raise those salaries and the best teachers in the world would gravitate to those D.C. schools. Within a couple of years, those schools could be the very best in the world as an example of what can be done in education. Instead, they're among the worst in the world. And you know, all those politicians that are strutting around the streets there with $170,000 salaries and fancy perks and very proud of themselves, you know, they don't send their kids to the D.C. schools. None of them. They don't put their kids in those schools, even though those are the schools that they're responsible for, and 35,000 black kids are trapped in them. Education, as Booker T. Washington realized, is the most important thing to making a man. It's not the facts you're learning. It's not the math problems you're learning to solve. You're learning to train your mind to find the truth. And that process takes place mostly between the ages of 6 and 18. And it's very, very important. And we shouldn't be shortchanging students anywhere. And the fact that we're shortchanging the 50,000 that are under the control of the U.S. Congress tells us there's something wrong with the Congress, not that there's something wrong with the kids.
Well, what happens if, like you're saying, you're running for Congress, but that same entity is the swamp that we're trying to clean up? That's what the public is being said. What about Oregon? I mean, I think...
Well, Oregon schools have this not as severe a problem, but the same problem. Oregon schools, as I mentioned, 1/3 of the money goes to the classroom. The other 2/3 goes somewhere else. And that somewhere else is not teaching kids. So you could do the same thing in Oregon, except if you run for Congress, you can't represent you would do it because you have no authority. It's the state of Oregon. If I were running for the state house, the Senate or House in Oregon, or for the governorship or something, then I could pledge to try to do that for the state of Oregon. I can only say, as a candidate for Congress, that I would make the 50,000 kids that we have responsibility for in the Congress have such terrific educations that the people in Oregon would be shamed into doing it too. So we know how to run schools. We had the best schools in the world. But in those days, most of the money went to the schools. I'll give an example. My uncle and my mother were both public school teachers. And after World War II, my uncle came back from the Navy and he started teaching again in rural Iowa. He taught a full load of classes, and they gave him a few bucks extra to be superintendent of schools. Those Iowa farmers were not going to put money into people who didn't teach. And that is, but the swamp that has, the swamp is spread everywhere. And it's in our educational system, as it is in a lot of other places, and that swamp has gradually swamped our schools. The solution is fire the people in the swamp, keep the teachers, double their salaries, and have the best schools in the world again. And I say double their salaries, that'd be a lot, but that would attract the very best educators to our schools. I might point out that the way these schools are run, I have a PhD from UC San Diego in education at Caltech. I have a very distinguished career in science. I wouldn't be allowed to teach science in a public school because I'm not part of the system. It is that nothing can be more important than the education of our youth. if you want to talk about a racial issue, no issue is more important than the education of all races at a high level. And as far as the U.S. Congress is concerned, some congressmen have tried to help the D.C. schools. They definitely have passed a few things to try to improve them, and those improvements have made a little marginal difference.
Anyone from Oregon?
Not that I know of.
I know
the only one I study is Pete DeFazio, and he votes against all the improvements because the unions don't want them.
I've even called folks in there.
So I know Pete's record, and he votes against the kids.
He votes against the kids.
He votes against the kids because the unions help him to stay in office. But Martin Luther King, and you know, he, more than anything else, he revered the Constitution, and he wanted constitutional rights for his people. You understand, we have no right to vote away the life, liberty, or property of another man. The Constitution protects us, but more and more it doesn't protect us because of the swamp and these.
Right.
And first thing of importance is that every citizen understand that and be able to read and understand and study the Constitution, just as he studies his Bible, just as he studies other important documents. He has to be able to learn the truth. That's what his education is about. That's what Booker T. Washington, our finest educator, wrote several books about. And if we could do that, most of the problems in our society would be solved.
Well, tell me this. Again, going back to Booker T. Washington, as you indicated, that right after the Civil War, Booker T. Washington got into that business aspect of it. And I think there were a couple other gentlemen, you know, another gentleman.
Well, when he founded this Tuskegee University, he got it going, and then George Washington Carver joined him there. He was a great scientist.
So they got now if everything was going well and people could see that, because again the war was identified as if it was slavery aspect of it, but now it's going whatever. What happened? Now the new Congress, the Congress that was there.
Well, our educational system did okay. It evolved from the one-room schoolhouse.
Why didn't it spread out?
And by the 1950s, it was pretty good.
Okay.
It was the black people didn't have quite as good as schools because of the segregation in the South.
Racism. Yep.
But they had better schools than we have today for the white people.
Okay.
The schools grew and the school system thrived. And in the 1950s, as I mentioned, America had the best schools in the world. There was a brain drain. People came here from all over the world because of our freedom. Since 1950, starting in about 1960, the swamp has gradually swamped us, and it swamped our schools. So the school systems from Booker T. Washington's day to about the 1950s and 60s improved and improved and improved until our students in the United States, on average, had the best schools in the world, and that included our minorities. But in the last half century, the bureaucracy, the hangers-on, the special interests, the people who don't care about the kids, they use the kids as an excuse to make money for themselves. This is gaining more and more and more prevalence until they've ruined the schools. If the people that get 2/3 of the money for education would at least take their money and go to Tahiti,
I guess
we'd probably be all right. The problem is they stay in the schools and make it hard for the teachers to teach. So those schools have to be fixed. I'm, of course, running for Congress, so people are interested in what I do. And one thing I know could be done is to make the D.C. schools the best in the world, not just for those 35,000 black kids, and not just for the 15,000 of other races that are in those schools, but as an example to the country, so that the states and the counties could follow that example and return our educational system to the wonderful thing that we had before, maybe even something better.
I'm thinking in terms, when I think about Oregon, and when I think about i.e. minorities, and more specifically blacks, they've always been identified as the majority of the population has been in the metropolitan area, Portland metropolitan area, normally Multnomah County and the city of Portland aspect of it. And in fact, it is the largest school district in the state of Oregon. Well, here we are sitting here right now. I can remember the bond measure that was just passed, millions and millions of dollars, and I fought against that bond measure because I looked at the people who were sitting at the table, and in all due respect, most of them, there was no one there that could spell construction. You see what I'm saying? And I'd been in the business before, and I knew how to put the deal together. But the bottom line is that, the fact of the matter is, they got this money. It was a historical amount of money. It went on taxpayers, senior citizens who were being gentrified now out of their homes because they can't afford those taxes, if you will. Yeah. But now all of a sudden they're finding at this stage of the game, they haven't even completed the job. And say, well, we're over. No, we're looking at $100 million, and we still don't know if that's enough.
Lars Larson studied this thing a few years ago, and he found that the Portland schools were costing $420,000 per classroom, probably about $450 today.
Yeah, right.
So in Portland, you're spending $450,000 of taxpayer money for every 30-student classroom for 9 months.
Right.
The teachers are not getting. The teachers in the classroom are not even absorbing a third of that. The other 2/3 is going to the swamp, and by that we mean the bureaucrats, the special interests. There are all kinds of. Yeah. It would take us 3 hours to describe them.
Exactly.
But you can easily understand them. They're the ones who don't teach.
Yeah.
They don't teach.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, in rural Iowa, they paid teachers, nothing else, in the 50s. And in the one-room schoolhouses, they hired a teacher. Education is learning to understand things like math, science, the literature, the great artists, the history of the knowledge of the human race. And while the student learns that, he learns to think about it, and he learns how to find the truth. One thing he would learn is that when somebody screams racism at a politician, like they scream at President Trump, who is no racist, they would learn how to figure out that it was a lie. Today, many people believe the lie because their minds are untrained. If the minds are trained and the person can find the truth in a situation, you can't manipulate that person. You can't lie successfully to that person. And that's what all of our students need to learn. The fact that the left calls the president a racist, calls him worse than Hitler, there isn't an epithet that isn't thrown at our president every day. The fact that they think that's effective is because a large part of the American people are getting poorer and poorer educations, and therefore they have trouble learning the truth. And when somebody throws a lie like that, some of it sticks. They're not sure, but they have no way of figuring it out.
Well, the media is identified as such, because a lot of times the whole issue of fake news comes up and whatever.
The media.
How do you define that? Are they the same folks? They didn't learn to read and write?
The media's always leaned left, but the media, basically, this is what has happened. The media felt that it was their privilege to tell the American people what to think. And it was their privilege to select the politicians. And when it didn't work on Donald Trump, they just went crazy. They lost their privilege. Enough of the people understood, because the overtaxation, the overregulation, the over-bureaucracy, the million lawyers running wild, the whole mess of people who sit at desks, look at computers, and really don't do anything except make trouble. That thing, as it grew and grew and grew, until every time you turn around there's a permit and a regulation and something you can't do, has damaged our medical system, has damaged our educational system, has even damaged our defense system. It's damaged the country to the point where we're having trouble competing with communist countries. The United States made the best products in the world at the lowest price. We had no problem. Now we have this swamp superimposed on everything. But the reason we're talking about education is if you could get the swamp off the backs of the educational system, the people could learn the truth for themselves and have the wisdom to stop this thing. We're very fortunate. We have a president who's doing his best, and the whole multi-million person swamp is fighting back. And we see that every day, to the point where you don't even want to read the news. You know, the news, these people have thrown so much profanity, so many lies, so much garbage at our president, that I think he's going to win this election in a landslide. Because the American people, not just on the right, but on the left, Oregonians are wonderful people, grassroots organizers are wonderful people. I've, as you said, been chairman of a state party.
Yeah.
I run for office several times. I know these people. Americans are decent people. They don't like this river of profanity. They don't like this river of lies. Right now they're being quiet. For a Democrat to say he supports Trump would be hard on him. They scream at him. But I think his election and what is going to come after it in these subsequent elections is going to show that throwing all the profanity you can dream up, all the lies you can dream up, all the garbage you can dream up at a president every day turns off 90% of the American people. And so we have, Donald Trump is not walk on water. He can't save our country by himself, but he's a turning point. And he's become a turning point especially because the left has come out so egregiously and so dishonorably against him that they're turning the people for him, even those who don't understand him. It's a wonderful time to be alive, because when great historical events occur, if you happen to live through them, you have a more interesting life. We have the greatest country on earth. The example of American liberty has produced liberty in other countries across the world. No, as George Washington said, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact words, he said that our constitutional republic was a great opportunity for the American people to give a great gift to themselves and the world, but that it may be the last opportunity. It was unique. We have to save this country. And I think we're going to do it. And I think the election of Mr. Trump, regardless of his actions, the election of Mr. Trump is an indication that we're turning. And the swamp is going to dry up. He's going to start the process, and a lot of good people are going to finish it. But remember that education is the most important. And if you can leave, and these guys in these fancy suits and these big salaries and these, I mean, that just infuriates me, can march around the streets of Washington while 35,000 kids are being black kids are being cut off at the knees for life by not even being taught to properly read and write. That's wrong. And in my view, that's the biggest racism. That's the biggest pit of racism in our nation.
And you know, in all due respect, again, that's where a number of folks, again, have the same mindset that I have. You know, it really bothers me to see the Chicago situation with these young people getting shot and this, that, and the other, and you know, it just goes on
I'm not discounting the difficulties in other cities and in other places. But I'm running for Congress. And that's part I can clean up.
I hear you. And then when you think about,
and you know, the Congress is so disinterested in this, they'd probably give me the job. They'd say, all right, Robinson, if you don't like it, fix it. We're not interested, and we could fix it.
And you know, I must admit also too that when I look at the well, like the riots today, over the weekend here aspect of it, they're talking about the two factions fighting against one another. In all due respect, they look all white to me, the majority, as if to say, look like we have another Revolutionary War. We got another Revolutionary War, and these are young people too. In many
the
ways.
Other thing is, there are 300 million people in the country. But the media want to cause trouble, so they go out and find the worst. Right? They go find the worst and put it up on the news for you. If you believe the media, this country is coming apart at the seams. But if you go down among grassroots Americans like I do and campaign, it's not coming across at the seams. 99% of the American people are fine people, and they aren't interested in that, and they're not involved in it.
Well, like I said, and that's why we started. I wanted to make sure that the viewers here get a good feel about this forum that they're going to have, and they're asking those questions about the swamp aspect of it, and hopefully, because the media is going to be covering this. Now, if all of a sudden they start asking, how do you feel about Trump? In automatic, that's it.
Well, I know how they feel about Trump. You got a Robinson for Congress sign over there.
There you go.
When I campaign, I carry a Trump sign, a Robinson sign, and believe me,
you get the attention.
Trump signs are in very high demand throughout
Well, at least they'll recognize your name because you got the Trump.
And not because he walks on water, not because he's not idiosyncratic, not because he lived a perfect life, but because he's trying to save this nation and he's making a good start at it.
And I want you to know, folks, I know who Art is, and I'm very familiar with his background. and I know where this man's values stand. I really do, Art. I really want to appreciate it because you got me involved. You got me back involved.
Well, you did a fabulous job.
And it's a Lincoln Republican thing, as you know. I'm always trying to go back to that history because, as I said, I've said, and I will continue to say this, in that back my great-great-grandfather, when he joined the Union Army, President Lincoln gave him the opportunity he gave them a uniform and an assault weapon.
Yeah.
I came out, I did ROTC in Texas. I joined the Marine Corps. I volunteered in the Marine Corps. And when I got out of boot camp, I was given a uniform and assault weapon. I still have them.
Good.
Okay, you got me? And so that...
You're probably still good with them,
Oh,
too.
yes, very much so. And so I guess my point is that sure, there were some struggles and whatever, but here I am today. And I want to give back. I want to give back. And again, like I said, I'm very interested. I spent quite a bit of time in Portland, Oregon. In fact, I was going to announce the fact that here are cups. When I started in the whole media business, I could have worked for the bank or U.S. I mean, I could have worked for IBM. But I spent my time in community. And these are 2 cups that I've got. It says Paragon on them. I've been in this stuff for 40 years, having owned the Portland Observer newspaper for a while, and the Oregon Voters Digest, which is an Oregon piece and whatever. So my point is that, folks, I'm telling you the facts. I've been around enough to know that if this man wasn't right, I'd probably tell him straight up.
I'll tell you, you provide a lot of amusement for me because when I put you in the middle of those guys in the Republican Party,
yes.
they just about died. And because one, they had a man of principle. What are they going to do with that? And he was black besides.
Yes.
It was wonderful.
Oh, it was beautiful.
And you did a great job. And it was probably a high point, if not maybe the real high point of my being chairman of the party, to watch what happened.
That was a fun thing.
You into those guys.
On the diocese, the guy who was running for chairman happened to be a Marine.
Yeah.
Former Marine, and then I was in the court, but I was on the diocese.
Wally Hicks.
And then I spoke. I jumped up and I spoke. They gave me the opportunity to speak. And folks, it was something else. The place was packed. And then we even had Jeff Mapes down there from the Oregonian, the same guy that introduced you to me.
Yeah.
Because he wrote the article about you.
Yeah, he was.
And I went to him after that because they basically gave the vote to the other group, if you will. And the bottom line is that I said, well, look, you got a story here. This is the first black man that would have even been an officer in the Republican Party, and it was brought by this man here. And Art, you said Art was a racist. Well, he hired me. Well, he basically got me involved. Jeff, why don't you do this? And as you know, folks, the Oregonian didn't write anything.
No, of course not. Jeff wouldn't do that. His job was to write up the left favorably and the right
very, very much so.
I don't know. He's kind of a nice guy. As far as I know, if he didn't have that job, he might be okay.
I'd say he's a racist. I can say that. I'm saying he's a racist because he didn't cover the story. I mean, here I was in the position.
But he didn't cover the story because it was positive for the Republicans.
Well, it was positive from the black community
sure,
too.
Of course, yeah,
I would have been
his main problem was he had the pillory Republicans.
Yeah,
but anyway,
but you're running for office.
Yeah, and I'm optimistic because President Trump is stopping the decay, and a lot of good people want to help him, but it's not going to be an easy fight. It took him 50 years to take over our country. It's going to take a while to get it back.
I got you. Well, look like we're coming to the end of the show, folks, but it's not the end. Okay, please get out there and vote. Go to that function that Face Talk was talking about at this point in time. We're going to have a heck of a show next week because I'm going to have my group, if you will. We're going to be talking about the results of that particular forum, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the swamp. We want to clean the swamp within our own community. Have a good evening. See you next week.